Woof, 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 woof.
You guys hear me? Can you hear me?
This is Bob McQuaid. I can hear you well, Michael.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Bob.
Huh?
How are you, by the way?
I've been doing very well. I was just thinking about you a little bit earlier, wondering what was going on with Burning Man this year. I imagine it's been canceled.
Hey, everybody, we're streaming live right now.
We will get this Star City Council meeting to order here at Star City Hall, June 2nd, 2020 at 7 p.m. First of all, I just want to welcome the public back into our city hall. Thank goodness. I think it's much better to have people in here when we're conducting business. So I'd like to have you all stand, please, and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Councilman Hershey,
Here.
Councilman Keys,
Here?
Councilwoman Solmonson. Here. Councilman Nielsen.
Present.
All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mayor Chadwick. I
Mr.
move to
Mayor?
approve the Agenda.
I got a
Second.
motion, and we have a second. Councilman Keys second that, if we didn't understand that. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, my motion carries. I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Keys.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of item 4A, regular meeting minutes of September 3rd, 2019. Item 4B, claims against the city for May 2020. Item 4C, final plat, Grinders Hope Springs subdivision, phase 1.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, one thing.
Mr. Mayor,
Hang on, Councilman Keys. Yes, Councilman Hershey.
Yeah, I found a typo in the meeting minutes of September 3rd. We tabled, was Mr. Todd till the 20th, and the meeting minutes say till the 20th, 2020. It's just a typo.
So 20th, 2019,
Yes.
right? Okay. Correct that. Councilman Keys?
Mr. Mayor, on the agenda item for the September 19th meeting minutes, the agenda item for Bren, there's some confusion on the names that were filled with question marks, and there's a name in there, Zach, which should be Zach Autin, A-U-T-I-N. There's a name Susan, which actually should be Liz Paul. And there's a name Mike Holmza, which should be Mike Hamza, H-O-M-Z-A. And then on the consent agenda for Grinders Hope Springs, under the site-specific discussion, it's labeled Amazon Falls subdivision, and it should be Grinders Hope Springs subdivision.
Okay. You want to modify your motion to approve?
I modify my motion to approve or to amend as discussed.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman?
I'd like to abstain from the minutes of September 3rd since I was not in office at that time.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I'll second the amended motion.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. We're on the item 5, which is a presentation by Ada County Assessor Bob McQuaid. And he's going to talk about our property values and such. Is he live? You're ready to go, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I was
There you go.
hoping you can hear me okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's nice to be with you this evening. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I was not actually going to be doing that this year because of when we typically plan this, it's in April. There was so much uncertainty, and we were just going to pass on it. I did get a couple of requests, and we agreed to do it via Zoom. And because of that, here we are on this second day of June on Zoom at the City of Star City Council meeting. I want to talk to you about the assessment this year. It's been an interesting year. We're just sending out 5,200 to residents of property owners of Star this year. Two things are really important, I think, to set the context for this discussion about the assessed values. The first one is, by statute, all of the assessors in the state, we have to be at 100% market value plus or minus 10%, or between 90 and 110%. Is what that means is that the State Tax Commission, they judge our work, the quality of our work each year They will take all of the sales in Ada County, which we had about 13,000 this year. They will time adjust them to up to January. This is going to be January 1st of 2019 and or 2020, excuse me. And they will compare the sales prices to our assessed values. And they will look at the percent difference. And so statistically, we have to be at again, 90 to 110%. That's really important. On single family residential last year and the year before, we were at 98%. The second thing that is important to remember in this whole discussion we're just going to undertake here in a minute, and I'll keep it to 10 minutes, is that when we do our assessments, and even out in the fee world, you typically look at, don't consider any information that came in after the date of the appraisal. So for us, what happened after January 1st, we typically do not bring that into the discussion. That's all going to be part of next year's assessment. But so much has happened this year. The federal government was making lots of changes. We decided to
You muted yourself, sir. Hang on one sec.
I don't know how I did that. I'll be more careful. So the total market value in the City of Star this year is $1.5 billion. And that's up 12% compared to last year's $1.3 billion. And one thing you're going to notice throughout this whole discussion, Star just had an amazing year on growth and growth of the number of parcels, the growth in value. Of all of the cities we've done so far and the counties, City of Star by far has the most impressive numbers. But we take the total 1.5 billion, that's the market value, not necessarily the taxable value. To come up at a potential taxable value, we take out the homeowners exemptions, 321 million. There's about $96,000 of exemption, other exemptions that are not out, have been processed yet, or we are aware of. We'll take that out. And then we add in operating property. Operating property, that's the pipelines, railroad tracks, telephone line miles of wire, any of that. That's all operating property that's assessed by the tax commission. And we won't know what that number is until August after that's been approved by the tax commission. But this all nets out to a potential taxable value for the City of Star about $1.2 billion. And that's about a 14% increase. I want to talk about residential property here for just a moment. And you have just almost close to 5,000 parcels. And that is an increase of about 9% over last year's 4,600. And this is an area where it's really impressive. Countywide, there's only been about a 2% increase in the parcel count. So there's a lot of growth going on over in Star. The market value, not taxable value, market value is $1.4 billion. That's up 12%. The median increase in Star on single family residential is 4.3%. And this is where we need to just have a discussion. MLS, their median increase countywide is about 10%. And we typically compare ourselves to that. We don't assess to that, but we should be close to 10%. The average increase. Well, I got a call early this year. In fact, it was in March, right after things were really beginning to unfold. There was a lot of uncertainty out in the community and in the whole country, for that fact. Layoffs were occurring. Tens of millions of, certainly millions of people a week were becoming laid off. There was a lot of anxiety and frustration out there. And I got a call from someone that I really respect a lot. They are, they come from one of the largest corporations here in the state of Idaho and in Ada County, of course. And they had commented that, are you going to freeze values for last year? At the same, assessed this year to what we had assessed last year. And this person was very concerned that that there would be, I think the word she used would be a firestorm if you increase values. by 10% or whatever, because people are just very, very worried. They're losing their jobs and whatnot. I never considered that before, but it's what I ended up doing was talking to some people from the Association of Counties, the Associated Taxpayers of Idaho. We talked to other assessors, other commissioners throughout the state. And we went, the representatives of this group went to the governor's office to see if the governor would be willing to support a freeze. And they were not responsive to that at all. So that ruled that out. We had a backup plan in my office, and that is that we would not be as aggressive with values this year as we have been in past years. Again, we would have typically been very close to 10%. So what we decided to do was we just did the full assessment. And then at the last minute, we decided to back off the assessments by about 5%. Yeah, that was on the average throughout the county to perhaps ease the anxiety. We had no idea what the real estate market would be doing when we were in June of this year. There were some cracks. It appeared that maybe the market would be softening. Although it's at this date, that really hasn't materialized, but we don't know what it's going to look like, months down the road. So to anticipate that there would be some type of a decline in the market and other things I've mentioned about, we did that 5%. We could do that here in Ada County because we're at 98%. So we figured that where we're going to be with our assessment level for 2020, rather than 98, we'll be probably at about 94%. So we're still within the range, but we were able to be not as aggressive in our valuations. And Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy at this point in time to just ask if there were any questions or comments about that before I proceed.
Any questions of the assessor from the council? Councilman Keys? No? Okay, none there, sir.
Okay. On the commercial side, we have about 160 parcels valued at $76 million. Again, that's a 15% increase, much higher than the rest of the county. Median change on commercial is about 3%. And so the total taxable value for commercial, you add in personal property, market value is about $79 million. I want to talk about the new construction law. That's really important because the counties and the cities and other taxing authorities can increase their budget if they want to do that by what is called the new construction component. That is, you take the new construction value times last year's levy, and that will give you a dollar amount that you can add that to your budget if you wanted to, on top of the 3% that you would be getting. So taxable value on new construction is $136 million. That's an increase of 33% on your new construction roll. And again, you compare that to the county at 10%, that certainly is just a very, very strong number. Residential, you have 294 new residential units. It's a 21% increase compared to last year. New subs change of status, that's $50 million. That's up 50% from last year. It's $33.5 million. A new subs change of status, that is if, we'll say if you take some ag land and it's been it's being turned into development land, that additional value over the ag to the development would go into the change of status. That's $50 million. Just second to the last thing that I want to mention here is the tax burden. That seems to be a great deal of concern for just about everybody, and I can understand why there's concern. But tax burden for 2019 in the city of Star is residential is picking up 92% of the tab, and commercial is picking up 8%. Compare that to the county, it's 72% residential and 28% commercial. There's a real good reason for that. Again, I said there's some concern as everyone a lot of people seem to feel that commercial is getting a break of of some type, and for some reason it's being pushed more over to the residential. And there's an explanation for that change. By the way, you did not change this year. You were 92% this year, 92% last year on residential. Most of the other taxing authorities experienced about a 2% increase in the residential tax burden and a 2% decrease on the commercial side. But the reason it's weighted so heavily towards the residential side is you have 5,000 residential parcels in STAR, 160 commercial parcels. In other words, you have 31 times the residential parcels as you do the commercial parcels. And when you look at the value, your residential value is $1.4 billion. It's 18 times the commercial value. So as how I see it is you've got a sphere about this big, which is your residential property. And then you've got a sphere that's maybe about like this, that is your commercial property. So that's why it's so heavily weighted towards residential. And when there was a shift, there has not been one in your county this year, or city, excuse me. But typically it's because there's so many more residential parcels and the values are changing much more and it's a much larger value. But this isn't to say that the fixed homeowners exemption is not causing the shift. In fact, it is causing a shift, but I think it's a pretty insignificant amount when you look at the total value of residential compared to commercial. I'm just going to wrap up with just a couple of observations, and that is the 2019 market slowed down somewhat compared to 2018. Growth in residential values went from 17% to less than 10% this year. Parcel counts grew, but they grew at a slower rate. New subdivisions are down 28%. Number of subdivision lots are down 16%. But there was still growth, but nothing like we saw in 2018. And I mentioned a minute ago when we were talking about how we were going to assess the residential property this year, a freeze or not being as aggressive. And part of it was because we did not know where the residential market was going to be. But we know that April 2019 to April 20, single family residential went up 13.5%. So that was fairly strong. There's very low supply, but very high demand. That's keeping the prices up there. Mortgage rates are still very low. Mortgage application rates, they're up 41%. So there's a lot of signs that the residential market is still fairly strong. And the question that I do get is what happens, how do we make up that 5% that we took off? What we typically do is, if the market goes down a little bit, we might be able to just pick it right back up as the market goes back up. And there would just really not, we wouldn't miss a heartbeat at all. If that doesn't happen, if there was an increase, we will just gradually get us back up to the 97%, 96, 97, 98% by just adding maybe 1% additional. Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, those are my remarks this year. And I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I love seeing you all, but it just was not meant to be this year.
Any questions of the assessor?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Keys?
Mr. McQuaid, what's the event that triggers the change in status for the new subdivisions? Is that at preliminary plat, final plat approval? What's the trigger for that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Keys, I believe it's the final plat that counts. We get preliminary plats and we start setting things up at that point. But I have to check with the staff, but I'm sure it's the final plat. It's when we say, okay, it would have to be the final plat that these are the values, because there would be some changes that in a preliminary plat that we certainly would want to make sure that changes to the preliminary are included.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the assessor? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time for coming on tonight and explaining that to the city.
My pleasure, and I hope to be there in person next year.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Goodbye.
All right. Now we're going to move on to item 6, which is our public hearings. Just real quick, if you want to speak to the Riken subdivision, which is the one up off of Foothill, correct, Sean? off of Foothill. I need you guys to sign up on that sheet right there so we can have you speak at the public hearing. And then we have the two Moon Valley projects, which are B and C, which the sign-up sheets are there as well if you haven't signed up yet. The process for the public hearings is the applicant will present their project. The council can ask some questions of the applicant. Then we'll have the public speak. You'll get 3 minutes each to speak. Then the applicant can rebut, and then the council will ask further questions. And so with that said, we'll move on to item 6A, which is the Riken Meadows subdivision. Does any of the council members have any ex parte communication on this project?
No, Mr. Mayor.
None. Okay, and then who's the applicant here for Riken? Right here? If you come up here for us, please, sir, and
Can you hear me? Is this working?
I think so. Yep, it's working. We're good.
Okay. Bill Lynch, 25220 West Deep Canyon Drive, Star, Idaho, 83669. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thanks to staff for helping me get to this point. So we are applying to annex a 5-acre parcel into the city of Star off of Foothill Road between Canada and Blessinger Road. This is a property that my father and I acquired last year, and we're just trying to subdivide it into a rural filling subdivision. So we're applying to annex with R1 zoning, and then also applying for a combined preliminary and final plat or short plat subdivision. Do you have a file for it?
I do, sorry.
That's all right. Give you-
Let me get several of these up here.
So as you can see in that drawing there, it's a pretty basic subdivision. We're going to enter off of Foothill Road to the south. It transitions off of Foothill Road with a pretty steep slope, and then it gradually smooths out to a more level site as you get towards the bottom of the property on the south side. Our plan is to put in a private drive, which would be a 20-foot wide road section consistent with the fire department's requirements and also with the city code for a private drive, I believe. And then that private drive would have a hammerhead turnaround in it to accommodate emergency vehicle maneuverability and turning around of larger vehicles. There's not really a lot to this property. There was an irrigation ditch along the north end of the property that we piped this spring before the irrigation turned on. So that is currently a piped irrigation ditch with an irrigation box. And we plan to pull irrigation water off of that box, deliver it to each lot, and have the individual users pressurize the irrigation for their individual systems off of that supply. We plan to run an underground power line from a pole that will be relocated. It's interfering with the right-of-way for the private lane. Move the pole over to the west or to the east about 40 feet, go underground and supply each property with a transformer from underground service. The property drains to the south from north to south, and there's an existing irrigation lateral that's a private lateral, and the ditch is also a private ditch. So those are not under the jurisdiction of Mill Creek or Middleton Mill or Drainage District 2. We did consult with them and got approval to build to their standards, even though they don't have jurisdiction over them. We did consult with them and obtain a review as far as they would go. They would not approve because they didn't have jurisdiction. Anyway, the intent is to continue to drain the site to the south and let any overland runoff or whatever continue to make their way into that drainage ditch. Any water or runoff that is accumulated on the road section, which would be a paved section, will be collected in the borrow ditches on either side of the road, controlled with check dams to maintain sediment control, and then ultimately discharged into a drainage swale at the south end of the property that would have an overflow, metered overflow. So it would not contribute more to the drainage ditch than what would normally be contributed from irrigation. Beyond that, each lot is right at 1 acre. And there's a reason we went with 1 acre. You know, the corridor along Foothill Road is a rural filling subdivision or rural filling neighborhood, and we wanted to be consistent with that. In addition to that, 1 acre seems to be kind of a magic number for septic systems with Southwest District Health and for private wells as well. So we would propose each lot would have a private well and a septic system for this lot. And that's also because Star Sewer and Water does not service out this far yet. They're about a mile away still, so there's no feasible way to get city services to them right now. Let's see. Beyond that, let's see, we covered the wells. The private drive is something that we wanted to contribute for this development because I'm kind of in a rural area myself, and I really appreciate low traffic densities. I don't want through traffic things. So that was kind of our goal and our intent with this design. There is an unplatted land to the east or to the west side. There was an option for looking at expanding that road south or to the east or to the west, but in order to maintain that rural, like I said, feel, we wanted to keep it as a cul-de-sac or a dead end lot or dead end road. Let's see. I think that pretty well covers everything. Oh, we did request some exemptions. So I did read through the staff report, and I read through what the agencies had said. It sounded like the fire department was concerned about sprinkling the buildings as there is no pressurized fire hydrant, fire suppression system locally. So in the CCNRs, you know, if it's not there already, we'll certainly include the requirement for sprinkling for each property, and we can note that on the plat, on the final plat as indicated there. As far as the comments from the city engineer, they had some requests for street lighting. And so again, due to the rural nature that we're proposing for this, street lighting would not be consistent with that. So we are asking for a waiver on street lights in addition to some other things. Common space being one of them, space for schools, parks, public streets, pedestrian walkways, bike paths. We don't anticipate including any of that into this little subdivision just because, like I said, of the nature of the rural nature of the area. And it's not contiguous with the other city amenities like kind. So it would be a stretch to go out on a rural road and put in a sidewalk and a bike path that went nowhere, in my opinion. We are also proposing a waiver for curb, gutter, and sidewalks in addition to the streetlights for the same reasons. It was our intent to just create a rural subdivision, and in my experience with subdivisions in rural nature, curb, gutter, and sidewalks don't really apply in that situation. Let's see. In the code, you guys have asked for a landscape buffer along Foothill Road. We are not proposing to do that. As far as what the city, Canyon Highway District number 4 is asking for is to build up the shoulder. That road section is a little bit narrower than what they want in that section. So they're asking us to build out the shoulder 5 feet and then taper off at a 4-to-1 slope for 15 feet as to accommodate a more safe traveling lane. So if somebody were to get off the road, they'd have a chance to react without crashing necessarily. So that particular gravel transition off of the road shoulder to the property would be about as much landscape improvements in that area that we would be proposing. There's a couple reasons for that. There's some large cottonwood trees in the area that we didn't want to disturb. And then at the entrance of the subdivision, we're planning to do some flowering deciduous trees and then line the driveway with some other deciduous trees, so create the tree line effect. So in lieu of landscaping along Foothill Road, we would like to landscape along the roadway to, I guess, create more appealing rural feel. I addressed what Canyon Highway District had asked for, and we take no issues with any of their requests. We talked with the postal service, and we are gonna put a turnout, a 20 or a 10-foot wide, 20-foot long turnout along Foothill Road that would be a cluster box for mail delivery for that section. Beyond that, I'm not sure there's anything else that's relevant, so I'd be happy to take questions from anybody.
Any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Keys?
so as you know, we're currently working with Canyon Highway District Number 4 on a process to put impact fees in place for roads. And I'm wondering if the applicant would be willing, in the event we don't get that done before they pull permits, to make a voluntary contribution to Canyon Highway District Number 4, equivalent to the amount of an impact fee that we're currently assessing for the Ada County Highway District. That would be to the person who pulls the building permit.
I guess I'm not familiar with the extent of the impact fee. However, I don't see any issues with that from my perspective. This would be an assessed value to the building permit as is pulled.
Yes.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, can we add that to the development agreement?
You can. We put it as a condition of approval.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking with the development agreement, it would be tied to the land, and so it would then be an obligation of each individual lot as a building permit is pulled.
John? I'll have Sean answer you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and Council, we do not have a development agreement with this application, so we'd have to create one. We can make it a condition of approval, which goes with the plat.
Did you hear that, Michael?
I did.
Okay. Would that satisfy you?
Yes, as long as it's something that obligates each lot.
Okay. Any further questions of the applicant?
Yes, I have one. So I thank you for explaining more about the 5-foot gravel buffer. My concern was that, if there's school children, if that area is going to be a bus stop, where they would wait along Foothill Road. So I was wondering, do you think that buffer area would be safe for children? And would you be willing to put in a light at that entry off of Foothill Road down into, at the corner of Foothill in the private lane, so that if that is a stop, that they're not waiting in the dark in the winter? And maybe it would be more by the mailbox area that you mentioned.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman. Yeah. With the extension of the shoulder to allow for the mailbox and the turnout for the mail delivery, there would be a great opportunity for a bus stop, a waiting location, and a solar powered light or something to that effect. Is that what you're requesting? Yeah, by all means, it would be reasonable to install a light for safety purposes for individuals waiting in the dark or delivering mail or retrieving mail in the dark. We'd be happy to do that.
Okay. And then I think you addressed all my other questions in your explanation. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant at this time? None? Okay, thank you, sir. Do we have a sign-in sheet there? And Ms. Dana, do we have anybody that signed up to speak online on this one? No? Okay. All right. So I have 2 people that signed up. None of them said that they would like to speak. Would you like to speak at all? Are you one of them? Are you Jeff? Okay, you want to come up here and speak? State your name and your address for the record, please.
Jeff Whitlock, 6697 Foothill Road. I'd just like to start by, we wouldn't be here today if he didn't lie about the whole thing. He started off with, we're just building 2 houses, my house and my son's house. And according to his son, there's no truth that came out of this man. According to his son, that their whole plan the whole time was 5 houses. We wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't have sold that land to them. And is there any of the houses before their property, are any of those annexed in to this?
Well, it's hard. I mean, there's property that it's touching that it's annexed in, but I can't tell you where your stuff, I don't know.
So there
that.
is other,
Yeah, it's actually contiguous to the city of Star
I was just
to
wondering.
be annexed in,
Or
yes.
is it just this 5 acres being annexed in?
Yeah.
Okay, we would not have sold him for 5 houses to be built there. All along there is 5 acre and 1 houses. There's no, subdivisions or nothing. And another thing is he takes it upon himself to tell the surveyors, see, it's 10 point whatever acres out there, and he takes it upon himself to go to those surveyors and tell them what to do with the extra point whatever and added it to his land. So, because otherwise he would not be able to build those 5 houses without that point something. We knew nothing about that. Where's the right in that? There is none. Everybody objects to 5 houses being put in there, but it's all been lies out of this man's mouth the whole time. We wouldn't be here today if he'd have told the truth. Nobody wants those 5 houses there. Nobody wants him building nothing there, really. It's wrong telling the surveyor to do something with our land. And that's the only way he's able to build those 5 houses, because he took that point, whatever. There's no right in what he's done. He's a goddamn liar. Sorry for my language. It's wrong.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garrett, would you like to speak? Okay. Please state your name and address, please, for the record.
Jim Garrett, 6775 Foothill Road in Star. We live in Canyon County, obviously, and I was surprised to find out, I guess, I'm finding out tonight that that property was annexed into the city of Star. Before it wasn't. And I've been sleeping a lot.
Well, tonight is part of the annexation. It hasn't been annexed yet.
Okay, that was my first question, because I thought maybe I slept through that. I don't pay much attention, but and I've been against being annexed to the city of Star anyway. So even clear back in 08 or 06, whenever Joe Baratabania's land was up for annexation across the ditch from me. Anyway, that was one of my questions, and I'm against that annexation. Secondly, I didn't hear it properly, but if they annex that property, do they have to get city water and sewer out there?
Not at the time, no.
Okay, I live just, 5 acres away, and I'm on a well that's 135 feet deep, and if they punch 5 wells, somebody's gonna have to mitigate the water deal, because I'm not gonna have any water. They start sucking 5 domestic wells out of that property, because we're all on the same water table, and it's pretty high. The water table's high there. It's an old riverbank or river ditch. But so I'm really concerned, about the water is my main thing. I'm trying not to be one of those old farts that said, hey, don't move here. Okay, that's not the issue. I've been there since 91. I built there in 91, one of the first people along there, and the water has been pretty good. And the ditch water has been spotty, but I'm concerned about the water, and also concerned about the traffic. Because if you put 5 houses there, there's going to be a minimum of 2 cars apiece. And probably if they have teenagers and I'm not against teenagers or hot rodders or anything else, but there's just going to be a terrible amount of traffic along what used to be, right after I moved there, they finally paved that. It used to be a gravel road. Believe it or don't, that's a long time. But I'm concerned about the water primarily, the traffic. The other thing is I raise horses out there and other animals. And I've had to shoot dogs on my place that roam around at night from the people up on the, and I'm not an anti-dog guy until they start chasing my horses around. So it just becomes an issue of intrusion, I guess, on that deal, but that's my concern, mainly the water and the traffic and
Okay.
people are welcome to move here. I mean, that's not the issue. It just doesn't, this particular project seems to be overcooked. I mean, if they put a couple of houses there, it wouldn't, I don't think it'd have that much of an impact, but five would be
You got about 10 seconds.
too many for me. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that's all who signed up to speak. You like to rebut, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I guess to address Mr. Whitlock's concern, personally, I never interacted with Mr. Whitlock on any level, so I'm not real sure where he is coming from. We
Sir,
purchased a
I
piece
know
of
you-
property from his father, sitting right here. And there was no misrepresentation of anything that we were doing. The property was posted for sale. We approached him about an offer to buy it. We came to an agreement, and that agreement was executed. There was a modification through the process of splitting the land, where we did acquire a small amount in addition to what we was 50-50, and we compensated Mr. Whitlock for that at that time, and it was in the agreement and it was signed by both parties. So there was no misunderstanding as far as I was aware of what was going on in that moment. So I apologize for any confusion, sir, but that was not the intent of the agreement that we made with Mr. Whitlock.
All right, guys, hey, there's just no sidebars. It's a public hearing. So you could just speak to the council up here at this point.
Very well. And then Mr. Garrett, his concerns for annexation, I guess I should clarify, we're only asking to annex our portion of our property along Foothill Road. It doesn't affect the other properties along Foothill Road. It should not impact their standing as a county inhabitants. As far as the wells go, everything we've looked at, there's a few wells in the area, actually not very dense. A little bit further away at Blessinger and Foothill, there's high density of wells up in the foothills there, and there's no indication that there's a water concern in the area. So 5 additional domestic wells would not impact the water table in that area, by all indications from what IDWR's records have shown. 5 homes is too much. I don't know how you can rebut a comment like that, other than to say, we're going with a rural development. We want 1 acre lots, which is a very low density home development. And, there will be a small increase to traffic in the area, but it should be fairly negligible. And relating to what ITD's comments were, should not impact the traffic in the local area, especially as it relates to Highway 44. That's all I have for that.
Okay. Any further questions of the applicant or staff?
Mayor Chadwick,
Councilman Nielsen?
just a few questions. I presume that you do have a water right to dig those wells. Is that correct?
The water right will be applied for by each individual homeowner upon the lot development.
And then could you run through the exemptions one more time for me?
Sure.
That you're seeking, or the variances, I should say, are the variances or
The
exceptions or both?
waivers, yeah.
Waivers, okay.
Waivers.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Nielsen, we are asking for waivers on common space, space to schools, parks, public streets, pedestrian walkways and bike paths, curb gutter, sidewalks, and streetlights, and the landscape buffer along the Foothill Road. I believe that's everything.
And on those, I guess, question to staff, you know, as we look at it in our long-term plan, what do these variances do for our long-term vision?
Mr. Mayor and Council, so they're not variances, they're waivers, and each one of them are covered in the code allowances. You have the ability to waive those under certain circumstances. For example, a rural type of development like this. Private streets that do not necessarily need to connect to adjacent properties. I don't know if you really want streetlights out in a rural area to affect the dark sky. So you have the ability to waive those. You have the ability to waive the open space requirements for lots with a density of 1 acre or less. And curb gutter and sidewalk also, you have the ability to waive that in this type of situation.
So let me rephrase the question. I think I understand our abilities here. I'm wondering about the impact on long-term plan for connectivity, walkability, things like that.
So
Didn't see anything in the staff report around these
Yeah,
requests for waivers.
if you, Mr. Mayor and Chairman, or Mr. Mayor and Council Member, if you look at the letter from Canyon Highway District Number 4, they indicate that Foothill Road will eventually be realigned. This section right here will remain a local street, and the collector street, which will eventually connect to, if it's New Hope, will run south of this property through that property that's already annexed by the city. And so that's where you'll more than likely see your bike paths and things like that.
No further
No
questions.
further questions? Any further questions, of the applicant or staff?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Hershey.
Just one quick one, just for me. I can't look at drawings. I'm horrible. So basically, it's a road that goes into a cul-de-sac and that's it.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hershey, it's effectively not a cul-de-sac, a hammerhead turnaround would be
Okay,
the
well,
appropriate description.
Something to 5 houses and done.
Correct.
Okay, just making
Terminal.
sure.
No easements to extend the roads in any direction.
Thank you for that.
Councilman Keys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I heard it and I didn't catch it, but is the private drive going to be paved or is that going to be a gravel drive?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Keys, yeah, we do intend to pave that section of roadway with a gravel shoulder as to create a more aesthetic and more user-friendly section of road.
But so the private drive will be gravelled, not there will be no blacktop on it?
No, sorry, pavement with asphalt. It would be paved with 2.5 or 3 inches of asphalt.
Okay, and then I have a question for staff. As I understand it, the comprehensive plan calls this neighborhood residential, and I believe the comprehensive plan would allow up to 5 homes per acre. Is that correct, Sean?
That is correct.
Okay, so for asking for 1 home per acre, we're actually well below the comprehensive plan.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of the applicant or staff? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We will close the public hearing and go into deliberations. Anybody? If there's no deliberations, do we have a motion?
Give us a minute.
Anybody?
Can I still ask a question? Sorry. Is it, or not?
Well, we've closed the hearing, but you could talk about it amongst
Okay.
yourselves.
I believe that my understanding is correct, that like this property would be served by the Star Police and the Star Fire Department. It's not part of the rural district or Canyon County Highway or Canyon County Policing.
No,
So that would be, okay, thank you.
but they would be, Canyon County would be backup to Star Police out there as well, or they could answer calls there as well, because that's part of Canyon County.
Primarily served
But
by
it'd be
Star.
served by Star Police. Star Fire District serves the entire area out there. And so that'll be part of the Star Fire District on that. Okay,
Well, Mr.
Comments?
Mayor, I'll start with comments.
okay.
First off, just to address the two gentlemen that addressed us in the public input. Long story short, this is the wrong body to bring any of that to. Anytime in a sale of an agreement of land is made and finalized, that's the property owner now is the owner and can do with anything within the legal rights to do. So we're not even the right body to address anything that may or may not have transpired between them. Second, I was concerned about all the waivers, but when I got my head around where this actually is and what it actually is, it's going to be a very quiet, small 1 acre lot, 5 houses, and that's all it can be. We rarely see 1 acre lots proposed to us, rarely. And something of the size of 5, I do not feel would be burdensome on any area up there personally. That's my comments, sir.
Okay, any further comments?
Mayor Chadwick,
Councilman Nielsen?
I guess I have a thought that occurred to me just as Councilman Hershey was talking. I wish I would have been able to bring it up during the public hearing, but perhaps council can help me with this. So we have an agreement with Star Sewer and Water that when we annex property, they also annex that portion of property into their district as well. So how do you anticipate, Mr. Mayor, that would transpire in this case?
Well, so the agreement is, if someone were to annex in, the current agreement, I understand, that someone were to annex into the Star Sewer and Water, and they were contiguous with the city of Star, they would have to annex into the city of Star at the same time. Right now, there is no annexation in the Star Sewer and Water because of the distance. That's
So
what,
it's a reciprocal agreement too. So if they annex into the city, then they
so
also.
you can also, in my understanding, probably put a condition that if Star Sewer and Water goes that direction, they would have to hook up into that as well, correct?
Yeah, you could. You'd need to,
At the
I would leave that, or I would ask Star Sewer and Water if they can, because of the slopes of this, if they could actually serve it without having to pump it back up to the roadway.
So
But yes, you could, you could require hookup to sewer and water when it's available.
So what happens though with the annexation requirement of that agreement? If we annex them, then Star Sewer and Water District is also supposed to annex them.
Yeah, they would have to, and I don't know the answer to that, if Star Sewer and Water can force annex into their district. Because typically an applicant requests that annexation.
So it wouldn't be a force, it would be a requirement of us annexing them, that the applicant would also have to annex
When it's a bit, when it's.
into Star
contiguous,
Sewer
yeah.
and Water District.
Yeah, you can-
So does that have, I mean, can you annex without connecting?
that's a question for them. I don't know.
I
So,
don't have an answer.
Chris, are you on the line? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you ask that last question again, just so I make sure I'm tracking about the annexation to Star Sewer and Water?
Yeah, so our reciprocal agreement with Star Sewer and Water requires that when the city annexes property, that property owner also annexes into Star Sewer and Water. And so even though there's not the ability to connect right now, does the annexation still take place with the connection required later? Or does the annexation get put off until a later time? How do we execute that reciprocal agreement in this scenario?
If I remember the agreement, it's somewhere if it goes the other direction, where if somebody annexes into Star Sewer and Water, but they're not contiguous to the city, the annexation should take place at the same time. If it doesn't mean it can't take place later, but it's often not, it may not be mandatory. It can be difficult when the when the homeowners or whoever have drilled wells and installed septics, and then when the sewer and water gets there, we say, well, abandon all that, and then we're gonna, force you to annex into the Star Sewer and Water District. It can certainly be done, kind of voluntarily by the applicant, but normally the MOU, as I understand it, it occurs. The requirement is to occur simultaneously if possible, but it's once an annexation has happened one way or the other, it doesn't still become mandatory when they become contiguous, if that makes sense.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that does answer my question. So the agreement is, so the language in there is if possible.
Yeah, yeah, well, right, because it's at a point in time, right? So when there's an application submitted, if they are also contiguous to the Star Sewer and Water District, then we would require that they annex in at the same time. It does not extend beyond the time of the application, as I remember the language in that MOU. I don't have it right in front of me, but that's how I remember it.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes, so I would,
Councilwoman?
I don't know if, I would like to add a condition that we require a street light at Foothills at the entry.
Okay. Councilman Keys, anything on your end there? Can you hear us still?
I can still hear you.
Okay. Nothing?
Nothing for me.
All right. Any
Mayor
further
Chadwick.
discussion? Councilman Nielsen.
I move that we approve Riken Meadows subdivision application for annexation and zoning with two conditions.
23. Condition number 23 would address Councilmember Key's requirement to add a condition for impact fees for County
Thank you.
Highway District number 4. And then condition number 24 would be install lighting by the mailboxes for school bus turnout safety.
And dark sky compliant street
Dark sky
lighting.
compliant, correct.
Yes, with those two additional conditions in addition to those already stated in the staff report.
I'll second.
We got a motion, we got a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Keys?
I didn't hear in Councilman Nielsen's motion to approve the preliminary plat and the final plat. Did he mean to exclude those, or would he like to amend his motion?
I did not mean to exclude those, and I will include the preliminary and final plots as well.
Okay, we got a minute second.
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. All right, we'll move on to item 6B, the public hearing for the Moon Valley Estate subdivision. Give me just a moment here so I can pull up that information here. This is the I got some information from him. So the top one you said? Yep. Okay. So, go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mark
Oh,
Tate.
sorry, let me start over. I apologize. We're going to open this public hearing. I got to ask anybody here on the council if you have any ex parte contact.
No, sir, none.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, with that said, Mr. Tate, sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Mark Tate again for the record, 1087 West River Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. Thank you for having me here and appreciate you guys getting back to business as usual or as close as we can right now. I think most of you have seen this project before, but maybe not all of you. So there is a little bit of redundancy and background that I'm going to go through. We have two different subdivisions on two different agenda items here tonight for the sake of everybody's time. I am going to kind of speak on both of them. And then if you have any particular questions that you want to readdress on the second item, be happy to go over anything else.
So hang on a sec here real quick.
Sure.
So we need to speak to the one and approve that and then go to the second one, correct?
Correct. He can talk about both of them, but you'll need to
Okay,
break them
all
up
right.
Yeah,
for your
as far as
motions.
motions
decisions.
and all that.
So are we opening two public hearings?
Chris, can they be open together?
Yeah, they can be held at the same time, especially if they're, well, you have the same applicant, and as long as they're related, there's nothing wrong with holding them at the same time.
Okay,
Well,
so
that's easier.
I'm gonna just real quick there, Mr. Tate, I just need to ask the council if they have any ex parte contact on item 6C for the public hearing for the Moon Valley Commons subdivision.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
All right, so now we'll move forward and we'll talk about both of these at the same time.
Appreciate it.
So we're opening the second public hearing as well for both item 6B and 6C.
Really appreciate that. And so this first slide here shows the property that we're talking about in general with the green boundary line. You can see there's a sort of an island in the middle of it. The north half of that is Moon Valley Estate subdivision, the second item. The first piece is up in the northwest corner, which is the Moon Valley Common subdivision. Most of it has been preliminarily platted. And that is on the next page here. So this is the preliminary plat that was originally approved. So the project is currently under construction. We've dug a number of different lakes out there. The first phase has concrete in. We're planning to pave yet later this month and record the final plat right around the end of the month as well. There's two different portions of it that we're talking about. And just actually to back up a little bit, the project was approved with private streets. Not to go into great detail, but we talked a lot about lack of connectivity of this property, given it's bound by the highway and the river and some estate parcels on the east side. So it did make sense in this instance. The property in the middle is owned by Mr. Matthew Thomas. He's a wonderful neighbor. He was not included in the original application as we did not own or have any sort of option onto his property. He's since decided to sell us the north piece of his property. His house is actually just south of that red line along the Boise River there. It's really beautiful right along the water in that location. So he's willing to sell us the north piece, which kind of fills in the hole in our donut, if you will. The piece in the northwest corner, part of it was originally preliminarily platted as 37 residential lots, and then another part of it was not part of the preliminary plat. It was kind of held out as some sort of future application. We've had an opportunity to kind of learn more about the market out here and who's interested in coming into this area. And we've got a really interesting mix of product inside of one community. Normally when people develop subdivisions, it's very homogeneous. You sort of do one sort of product and everybody's kind of got the same thing. And you run into people going, well, I'm, don't want to be around the little lot guys because I'm on a big lot and vice versa. What we've done here is create something a little bit different. It really is a mixed residential community so far, mixed use community. Where we do have full-on estate lots, which is included in this subdivision application, half-acre lots along the lakes and rivers. The Moon Valley Commons subdivision that you see in the northwest corner is a little bit different concept that probably you guys haven't seen in front of you before. It's not a new type of product, but it's really geared towards empty nesters and people that are downsizing their homes. The houses are built off of a common court, as you can see. They're detached single-family homes, not attached, but it is a smaller lot product. And it's really geared around living in a community that has a lot of open space around you, but not necessarily having a lot of open space on your lot. We feel like it's a perfect place for it. We have a huge amount of open space. It borders a lake, a park, common areas within it. In the middle of the project, along the entry road there's a clubhouse that we're building. It's going to have a full-scale gym, common area, rec room, bar area, all open towards the kind of resort pool that's on the edge of a lake with a wall over it. So something very spectacular. I would say on par with any of the nicest communities built in the entire valley is our goal with it. So very nice community amenities, really brings people together outside of their homes. We've got pathways and green belts and that sort of thing as well. Next slide. So this is the preliminary plat for Moon Valley Commons. There are full-size streets wrapping within the community, and then off of the streets, you can see they're built off of shared driveways. And so the goal really is to have all of the garages facing the common driveway. So as you're driving down the street, you're actually not looking at a bunch of garage doors. You're looking at fronts of houses, front door steps. The garages are tucked away from the street. So it actually, for driving through a smaller lot area, creates an incredibly nice street scene. What can happen when people do some smaller, skinnier lots, you just end up with a sea of garages, and that's all you see because, you get a 2-car garage and a skinny lot, and that's pretty much all you have room for. In this circumstance, we have the garages facing a motor court. We do the architectural design of the homes all together. So each one of those groups of 4 ends up being built together. They have to be designed together. Just given the proximity to one another, it's important to really understand the relation between the houses. You don't want people's windows looking into the one next door. So each pod is its own builder, and all of them get built at the same time. They're really designed around, looking outward in the right places, off the back of the lots. Most of the lots back up to some form of open space, common area between the lots or on the lake. In the front, you're looking at tree-lined streets and open areas. So really a nice feel. And then having significant community amenities and open space kind of around this product. Go to the next. This gives you a better idea of just the amount of open space and common areas. One of my favorite parts of this project is the beach club that we're planning. So that lake that you see there is the existing lake. As you drive over Highway 16, driving north, that was excavated to provide a bunch of fill material for Highway 16. We're going to do a little bit of reshaping on the south side of it eventually, but what we're planning on the east side of it that you see there is basically it's called a beach club. We're going to have an actual sandy beach going out into the edge of the lake there. We're going to build a dock, a little bit of a boathouse for the homeowners association where we can store stand-up paddle boards and kayaks and do some pretty fun lake activities out there. A lot of open space, walking areas between the lots as well. I should also note that along the west side of the lake, we already are conditioned to have public greenbelt access in that location. So that it's actually, there's already a paved driveway there that's turning into a public access greenbelt. So that's pretty exciting. Next. The next application is the Moon Valley Estates subdivision. This was the 10 acres kind of in the middle of the project. We had already planned a street stub into the north side of it, so it didn't really necessitate a huge amount of redesign. In working with the property owner, he was very particular about what he would allow as far as development of the property, given the adjacency to his home. He did want estate lots and privacy in that location. We were able to do a lot of open space around the periphery of this subdivision and a pathway going through, connecting through there. You'll also notice on the east side, we've got more access down to the river in that location. There's kind of a cool bend in the river in that area, and we'll have pathways that walk down to that location. Yep. And these are just some nice renderings. I believe we're in or close to in for sign permits, actually for the entry monumentation for the subdivision. Riverstone is the marketing name of the project. Moon Valley Subdivision is the plat name. So we're really excited. We've got that lake dug already on the entry. A lot of board form concrete, real stone, landscaping. As you come into the project, it's going to be very unique in a good way, I think. It sort of looks like Stonehenge as you're coming in there. You can see these little monuments creating an effect as you come in. There's going to be large metal boxes internally illuminated with this kind of river rock silhouetted cut metal with some board form concrete structures adjacent to them, and it'll create this kind of lighting portal effect as you come into the project. Very, very different than anything that's been done here before, but it should be really exciting. Very excited to see it installed. So like I said, we're pouring concrete out there right now. This first phase in the entry is going to be going here any day now. Riverstone Club, we're under construction on the wall adjacent to the club site right now. The sidewalk is being poured. The clubhouse, we're working on architectural drawings right now, includes a swimming pool, clubhouse. We've got a very modern design aesthetic that we're going for. It's actually more of a mountain modern, sort of like Sun Valley and Deer Valley and Bend, Oregon. The next one. This gives you an idea of kind of the scale. There's a pool house with a covered area, swimming pool with lap lane abilities, and then shallower pools as well that tie into it. On the building, we've got glass garage doors in the gym that open up to the pool deck. We've got glass garage doors in the party room area, indoor-outdoor bar that kind of opens up to the outdoors for parties and that sort of thing. Next. There's the different angle of the clubhouse. Plaza areas along the lakes, sitting, seating, that sort of thing. And I think that's about it. Got maybe one or two more of the beach club there. And I think that's it. So that's all I had for you. I have gone through the staff report. We do address some of the private drive aisles in the staff report. We've met with fire extensively to go through, fire service. We have a letter from the fire department. They're okay with our 4 units per cluster based on that discussion and their requirements, and slightly narrower than normal private drives off of those. The streets internally would still be the same requirement that we have with our development agreement for the full street width. Good, I think that's it.
Any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Keys?
So in going through the packet, the Idaho Transportation Department had referenced the lack of a TIS and the inability to execute against our proportionate share agreement by implication. because of that. And I'm wondering if the applicant has since started a TIS or what their thinking is on that.
That's a great question. ACHD also had a few letters in there for each of the subdivisions. We did do a traffic impact study for the entire project. ITD did issue at that point a letter with conditions on the project. So ITD actually did, well, ITD can't condition, but through ACHD, we agreed to a condition to actually do improvements to State Street. So given that we've already done the traffic impact study for the entire preliminary plat, which you saw at the beginning of this presentation, and we're conditioned with that, I feel like we're definitely covered by ITD. Entering into anything additional with ITD would basically be double whammy on the improvements because, you know, it would have been one or the other. You know, we agreed to actually do the physical improvements tied to a certain number of residential units on the original approval, which we're still going to be required to do. It's also worth noting that the traffic impact study that we did for the original preliminary plat, we did for quite a few more units than was in the preliminary plat. That way we knew we would be covered as other things came in. And so ACHD's letter does acknowledge that they weren't going to require another traffic impact study based on that original study, and the conditions still holding.
So ITD indicated that once the TIS was reviewed by them, that they would remove their objection to the project. Have they done that yet? And do you have a letter that says that?
I have not. You know, ITD is a recommending body. And so, you know, depending on the jurisdiction, people treat that differently. But knowing that we had already entered into or have conditions to make improvements to State Street, I didn't see that as problematic.
So is that something you'd be willing to pursue and get that letter from them removing their objection? They are a recommending body, but they're also, they serve as our expert. We have no transportation department, and I'm pretty interested in their opinion on these things.
Sure. Yeah, I'm certainly willing to go meet with them and talk to them about it. I'm not very familiar with this memorandum and that process, since we were originally approved prior to it being in effect. And you know, we went the route that we agreed to a condition on an ITD facility, which actually is an incredibly unique thing to do. ITD rarely, if ever, is successful in getting an actual condition to improve their streets put onto a developer because they don't have the ability to condition it. Frankly, as you guys know, you've had a lot of discussions with them, and that's why they're as limited as they are. So we did agree to do the improvements along State Street, which probably no other subdivision in the city of Star has probably ever agreed to do.
So since you finished your TIS, have you had any conversations with ITD about what they think a proportionate share of other improvements would be in addition to or instead of the current improvements you're doing?
I haven't. You know, if I frankly don't know what that means. I think it's so new that you know, I'm not aware of any other project that has agreed to a condition yet like that. Maybe there are some, but I'm not sure what that means exactly, if it's a dollar figure and how they would even calculate that. You know, typically, you know, if it's an impact fee, there's an impact fee study and a capital improvement plan, and there's very specific state code around what an impact fee can be. And short of having that sort of information, I'm certainly not willing to agree to some nebulous amount.
Okay, next question I have is on the Moon Valley Estates addition that you're bringing before us tonight. Is there an easement through there to extend the pathway so that we can ultimately have a contiguous green belt along the river?
There is not along the river. The pathway goes through the Boone Valley Estates subdivision. The property actually doesn't include the river frontage in the Moon Valley
Okay.
Estate subdivision. Mr. Thomas's house is on the south side of the lake and his patio's basically on the bank of the Boise River, so.
But there is an easement of some description to make that path contiguous all the way
Yes.
from east to west.
Yep, yeah. It has to jog around his house and go up to the north and then come back down onto the river. But we did include that. And that was one of his very particular items that, you know, he's not going to be willing to sell the property if somehow there's going to be a pathway going through his backyard or next to his house. So on the exhibit there, you can see the pathway going through the north side there.
This one right here?
Yep. And then it comes back down, and you can see the pathways again heading back down to the south to the river. And then just beyond our property line, going further east, there's another estate residence right smack dab on the river. So I wouldn't ever anticipate that the green belt's gonna continue along the north bank of the channel there. I do feel like someday, you know, very well could be along the south side of the river there and go a long ways. But we also connect on the west side. There's actually room to go under the Highway 16 bridge. I believe the city's in some agreement or acquisition along the west side of Highway 16. Our Greenbelt path connects to that as well.
So your path is actually going to go all the way down along the side of your property along Highway 16 to basically 44.
Yeah, so it'll have public access all the way out to the north. It'll also go under the bridge to connect to the west side of Highway 16. And it connects all the way along our frontage there where we own the river frontage. So kind of goes back to the whole hole in the donut. He owns 20 acres right in the middle there.
Okay, and then the city engineers report indicated that they recommended that condition 1 be addressed prior to approval of preliminary plat, and that was for easements for sewer and water facilities. Has that been addressed?
Yes, we do have an easement agreement with the district to service our first phase, which is off of that kind of main spine road in the middle of the project off of Moon Valley Road. We actually extended sewer and water all the way from Heron River under Highway 16 through the Moon Valley Commons property and into the subdivision. So we have easements covering all of those utilities, and we're entirely annexed into the sewer and water district.
Okay, and then Mr. Mayor, I have a question for staff. I can hold it for later. I can ask it now.
You ask it now.
Okay, we had a letter from a citizen who noted that we hadn't followed our own process by issuing a notice of application acceptance and completion. Has that actually been issued, or is that outstanding?
That has been issued.
That has been issued. Okay, thank you.
It's updated in.
That's all I have for now, Mr. Mayor.
I will make one more addition on something that we're doing. You can see a line of trees on the west side. I did work or tried hard to work with ITD to figure out some buffering there to try to put a sound wall on the property line and actually build up a berm that would, in my opinion, serve both ITD and the private property to limit future noise complaints from citizens of Star to ITD. They weren't interested in having 1 grain of sand put onto their property to have any sort of berm or sound attenuation on their property. That was really difficult to deal with. But we've gone ahead and said, fine, we'll take up more of our property and shove the whole thing onto our property and build up a berm and some sound wall there to have a buffer and protect those people in the future.
And just to go back to what we're talking about, that pathway, where's that pathway going to be in conjunction? to
It would
those
be
trees?
on the east side of that berm.
So
So
between the river and the pond and
the pond and the berm, yeah. So it'd actually make it much more enjoyable not having traffic going 70 miles an hour right next to you. We can only take it so far. It sort of pinches down at the end of where you see those trees and the highway starts going up and it pinches down. So it's sort of a perfect storm of not being able to buffer it, but cottonwoods grow fast. So we're going to plant a lot of them.
Okay, any further questions of the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman?
So this is the first time I
Yep.
have seen this, so I appreciate your further explanation. So I understand correctly. So are the pathways inside of the development, are they public use or only private?
No, they would be open to the public,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And then the lake that goes on the west side, that is along the pathway that gets down to the river. Is that just for the neighborhood? Is it private or is
That
it
would,
public?
that would be private, yeah.
Okay, and then my other question is, I noticed in our staff report that there was a letter from Mr. Paul Akins
Yes,
regarding the
drainage.
drainage,
Yeah.
yes.
Mr. Akins is here, so I'll let him speak to
okay.
that and then probably come back and address it then if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, perfect. And then a question for staff.
Sure, yeah.
I noticed in the Commons application, it references a commercial lot in there, but I didn't see, there's no reference to commercial property in this. So can you explain?
Yeah, good point. So the remaining piece in the north that's not included in the subdivision area of the preliminary plat, the whole property was zoned mixed use. We sort of acquired multiple different properties that had already been zoned when Highway 16 was put through there. So there was sort of a conglomeration of commercial, mixed use, residential, all in that area. So the city and we felt at the time the cleanest thing to do would be just blanket zone the entire thing as mixed use. So it's really the remnant mixed use parcel. We don't have a specific plan for that parcel yet. And so that's sort of to be determined, I guess.
Do you see this drawing right here?
Yes.
So all this section right here was left open. That's part of the mixed use component here. This was all what was brought in before. So the entire development that you see that's in all of this, right, was all brought in as mixed use. This is the only portion that was brought in as residential. And this was still left open right here
Okay.
for mixed use. And this is part of tonight, I think, right here, right?
Yeah, so that's the subdivision portion. The four pack is in that crosshatched area. And then the remaining parcel to the north is part of the preliminary plat, but still just left as a mixed use lot essentially. So
Okay.
that would be subject to some sort of future application to do something on it.
So the request on our packet, in our packet on the land use staff report, in the comments, in the request section, is that incorrect? in the-
Repeat that, please.
Yes, in the request, on page 1, in the Moon Valley Commons land use staff report, should it state that it's just for the 93 residential lots, 34 common lots, and the private road? So it's not including a commercial lot in this piece?
Correct.
Okay,
Well, the plat does include the lot.
Which,
It's,
yes.
it's one,
But they're not,
sort
right,
of
they're not
future-
developing that right now, so it's, yeah, it's. Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman. So yeah, so it states 93 residential lots, 34 common lots, 1 commercial lot, and a private road. Development agreement modification. So that's the application. That's the Moon Valley Commons application.
So will you speak to the development agreement modification then?
Yeah, the development agreement modification is really doing two things. It's annexing the Moon Valley Estates property into the development agreement, which was our hole in the donut. And then I believe the other modification was the city code requires a maximum of 2 units off of a shared driveway. This would allow us to do 4 units on a shared driveway.
Mr. Mayor and Council, it also allows us to approve the private roads and ask for the modifications.
Yes.
So basically it's acting as a PUD, but since they already had a development agreement, we're modifying that to include this new information within it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if I did. So you got further questions?
And apologies on their backstory on the whole project. I could have gone into more detail.
Any further questions of the applicant?
Mayor Chadwick.
Councilman Nielsen?
So the part of the city's conditions of approval are the tree selection from the Treasure Valley Tree Selection Guide.
Mhm.
And I've noted in here, you just mentioned that you wanted to put a bunch of cottonwoods along there. The only mention of cottonwood in the Treasure Valley Tree Selection Guide, I will read from it. Not to be planted in rights of ways. I realize this is not a right of way. These trees exhibit characteristics including but not limited to extreme insect or disease susceptibility, soft or brittle wood, and or limited cold and heat hardiness. Specifically on the cottonwoods, softwood subject to decay, shallow roots, and aphids that present such problems lead to excessive maintenance, cost, hazard to other trees, and potential public safety hazards. So the cottonwood family would include poplars and aspens, all those really fast-growing trees.
I was going to ask about poplars.
So I would like to recommend and ask you to not plant anything that is in the section of the not to be planted for the Treasure Valley Tree Selection Guide. Something that's a little more durable. I realize that fast growing is great, but 8 to 10 years for a lot of trees to get up to 20, 25 feet in height, especially for, excuse me, some of the maples is pretty common. It's probably a more durable selection.
Yeah. And I kind of half said it in jest, knowing that cottonwoods are sort of,
they're terrible.
yeah, they're not
Filthy
fun.
trees.
They're all over the river frontage
Personal
there, so
opinion
don't blame us that they're already covering the riverbank. But yeah, your comments noted.
Okay, any further questions of the applicant?
No.
No? All right. So we'll move on to the public testimony. When you come up to speak, state your name, your address, and just a reminder, you have 3 minutes to speak, and we'll start with Mr. Paul Akins.
Paul Akins, my address is 8099 Moon Valley Road. So I've already submitted, or my attorney submitted a comment letter to the city council. And I just want to maybe cover a couple points in there, just to make sure that they're kind of clear. So right now the developer is looking to move Lawrence Kennedy Canal. So maybe if you could pull up the diagram of
Let's see here. This one?
maybe one with, I believe the lots. Pull out a little bit.
No?
Yeah, that one will work fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so right there beside the kind of the pink lot right there on the, towards the west. So that's my property right there. So that's the 10 acres right there. So that's mine. So at the south side of my property, there is a drain ditch. So right now the developer is planning on relocating that drain ditch, and they're also looking at relocating some collector ditches for that drain ditch. And as part of their agreement with Drainage District Number 2, they'll be taking over the maintenance and of that drain ditch and the collector ditches for that. And I just want to ensure that they're providing enough easement access for the maintenance and the cleaning of that drain ditch in the future on their property. And where the drain ditch is being moved right now, even though the ditch is being moved, the current easement does not move with the ditch. So there is basically there will not be any easement on my property for them to access the new collector ditch that they're putting in place. I just want to ensure that the developer is aware of that and that they'll be going ahead and providing the appropriate access through the 4 lots. So this is kind of an older one, but I think the last one I saw, there was approximately 4 lots that would be sitting against the collector ditch. So there would need to be adequate access through those lots to maintain that ditch in the future.
So just so we're clear, you're talking about this ditch right here being
Yeah, so it's, that's not really that's kind of where it was located in the past. Currently where it's pretty much all located on their property, and they're relocating it to another location, which is fine. But they just need to make sure they're providing adequate access to that ditch for maintenance in the future.
Good.
And there's a lot more detail in the actual comment letter, making sure that there's no obstructions or fences or anything like that, so that there's always access to that ditch for maintenance going forward. So that's because of the first part there. The second part is on the west side of my property, right there, kind of that new development right there. So I just want to make sure that they are planning on placing some type of collection mechanism to catch any drainage water that would be coming off of the lots they're putting in right there. Because right now, I'm not sure if on the new development or on this portion of the development will be the same, but everything else is actually being elevated higher. So it can be approximately a 1.5 to 2 foot above my property level. So I want to make sure that they're collecting and making sure no drain water is going onto my property because it is actually farmland.
Okay.
And the third point would be, I was just wondering if there's actually a plan or something in place for the additional traffic that will be generated by the 90 some odd houses there, which will probably be around 200 cars on Moon Valley Road, which is right now a fairly narrow 2-lane road.
Okay.
All right. And I think that is all for my comments right now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Lloyd Akins?
My name is Lloyd Akins. I live at 10390 West Beacon Light Road, Star. I own property at 8153 Moon Valley Road, which is the little spot right there.
This one?
That's the property I own on the end of where my son's property is. So my problem or my concern, I don't have a problem really, but I do have concern because that traffic is a problem on Moon Valley Road. And when the property to the west of my property there, when that is done as commercial property, of course, I have no idea, and I suppose that they don't have any idea really at this present time of what that will be. But that is, commercial means traffic. And traffic is something that Moon Valley Road is not equipped to handle at the present time. So I would like to see something in place to handle the traffic. I would also like to see some barriers and one thing another for a little traffic dampener or whatever, maybe along those areas there as the traffic improves. But that's my main problem, is the traffic of the situation and the availability to get in and out of there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Miss Kathy Freeman?
Kathy Freeman. 101 Beach Street, Wales, Alaska. And I have property in Shooting Comet, 10519 West Vega Court. Just a few questions. Just some things came up regarding the subdivision. There's supposed to be about 90 houses, I guess. Where is the church in relation to the subdivision? I was just wondering. Right there.
I think it's right here. This is short right here, correct? Yeah, so it'll be right up here.
Oh, okay, yes, that's right. Just in regard to, you kind of answered some of the questions with different sized lots and for different, people, different people's, excuse me. What kinds of values are going to be on the properties? Like what values of houses are going to be?
So you could ask him his questions, and when he comes back
Oh,
up to
okay.
rebut, he'll answer your questions
Yes,
for you.
thank you, thank you,
Yep,
Mayor.
you bet.
Council people, okay. That's kind of one of the things I was wondering is, what are some of the values, just in terms of thinking of affordable housing for people? Are there going to be different values of houses? Are they going to be all upscale, upper class, middle class, lower class, any of those mix, or all of one is one of the things? And what kinds of homeowners association fees will be assessed? Thank you.
Thank you. That is all that we had signed up to speak. Mr. Tate? You want to come up and rebut?
Mark Tate again for the record. If you could go back to my slide presentation. Actually, the very last slide after thank you. I have a feeling we might
This
talk
one right
about this. Yep. This is the south boundary of Mr. Aiken's property, the north boundary of ours, and this is the drain that Mr. Aikens was referencing. You can see historically, Mr. Aikens was farming there a little bit south of his property boundary and thus draining onto this property. So we've got a small user ditch basically to pick up the water there. And we have no problem making sure that we have adequate access, and the HOA is going to maintain that as that water, as he farms, could continue to come to the south. Then we convey it into the drainage district structure which we pick it up and pipe it. All of that is in our license agreement with the drainage district that's already been approved and or annexed into the drainage district. So, and it actually goes back to, sort of drainage along the periphery. As he said, we're filling, significantly on the property groundwater out there. You can kick a pile of dirt down and you'll be in the water level. So we've got about 3 feet of fill probably around that perimeter there. So it definitely will be able to pick up any water and convey it over to that area. As far as drainage onto his property, we're not planning to drain water onto his property. So, little bit of discussion about traffic. We are required to improve our road frontages as things develop out there. More improvements would happen to the roads. ACHD, through our traffic studies, done traffic counts along Moon Valley Road. It's very, very low, obviously being a dead end road currently out there. So quite a bit below the ACHD thresholds and level of service requirements out there. And then as far as values, we introduced the product, the cluster product, exactly for that point, to have a different price point. We don't want all $1 million houses out there. We do want to mix of different price points. They're still going to be very nice in quality and part of an incredibly nice subdivision, but it will be a nice mix. I think that was about it.
Okay, we got any further questions of the applicant?
There was one
sorry.
comment from our engineer. There was, our application has 20-foot common drives. The city code is 28. And we did run that through the fire district and just wanted to clarify that that would be, as long as it was approved by the fire district, I think that's how the condition reads, that we can do that. That was my clarification.
Good.
That's it.
So, sorry, we can't. Unfortunately, I apologize for that, but any other questions of the applicant from council? Oh, the easement, yeah, talk about the easement for the ditch.
So you can see there's a common lot on the southwest side. There's a little turnaround actually, so we can get in and maintain the structures that are there. The swale, which would be on the south side of his property, and that's really all it is. It's a swale. There's no other water being conveyed other than that very small amount of a field there. That's something that could be maintained as a user ditch, user swale. And that's how we intend to handle it. So we're not going to go onto Mr. Aiken's property. The drainage easement, you can see the drain actually cuts the corner of his property over there with all the willows and stuff. So there is some drainage easement over there currently, but we don't have any intent to go up into his property, nor will we need to.
So we could put some conditions on there that just make sure that we maintain your own water on your property and that you maintain the easements that are required to take care of that ditch. So we, unfortunately, I know you want to ask questions, but we can't do it during the public hearing. I apologize for that. So we'll have to. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he's getting at is, he wants an easement on the south side. I'm not sure,
You mean down here on this side instead of right down here,
correct,
right?
and instead of through the private property. I'm saying that's not necessary. The homeowners association is going to maintain it. I don't think we need a special condition for maintenance of something that we're going to maintain. We understand that he can be farming there and that's why we're going to put that swale there.
Okay. Any further questions? Councilman Keys? No? Okay.
Can you explain a little bit about what improvements that are going to be done on State Street that you have agreed to?
Yeah, so when we did our traffic impact study, we analyzed all the intersections around this project, including on State Street. That analysis basically said at short lane at a certain trigger, we needed to install a right turn lane and the frontage improvements coming into short lane. At that point, we did engage with ITD and have a number of conversations back and forth. Originally, they wanted to require us to acquire right-of-way in addition to their right-of-way to put a turn lane in, which we don't have an ability to acquire condemned property, so we weren't going to agree to something like that. They did relent and realize we have 100 feet of right-of-way and a right turn lane can very easily fit within that right-of-way. So we did agree to widen along the State Street frontage, a turn lane in that location. And that would help with the church traffic and any other future traffic in that area.
Just to make sure I understand, so is there a way to turn left as you're going out of the subdivision onto State Street? Is there any?
There's, yes, and we have room in that location next to the church to be able to have kind of a right turn lane and a left turn lane heading north there. And we're actually working with the church on the short road frontage. It's really tight in that location on some shared improvements that we would do with them. And they've said, as long as we've got the room, then they're okay with it. We're very constrained on the west side of Short as far as anything that can be done, but we can get the improvements on State Street and do some improvements in that intersection. Ultimately, Palmer is going to be the signalized intersection as far as I know. Because it lines up on both sides of the road. Short doesn't line up to the north and Hamlin doesn't line up to the south. So there's a number of projects actually that are required to put that signal in at a certain time at Palmer. So that will help as well.
That's down here to your east.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Any further questions of applicant?
You.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing and go into deliberations. And remember, we have both public hearings open.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Keys.
when this first came before the council, we hadn't yet entered into our proportionate share agreement with ITD. Subsequent to that, we have, and in fact, that agreement is so new, the ink is barely dry. I'm going to be honest with you, I am reluctant to, in one of our very first public hearings since the execution of that agreement, to walk away from it and say, oh, we're going to give you a hall pass on this. So frankly, for me, it's going to be a condition of approval that the applicant work with ITD to understand how that proportionate share agreement is going to apply to them. And I believe they have a beautiful development here. I think that we do need to recognize that there are certainly some traffic and transportation issues in our city. We heard from the assessor today how much growth we've had, and I think that we need to acknowledge that. And as a council and as a city, I think the responsible thing to do is to see to it that our transportation system is maintained to the best of our ability, even though we are not a transportation district.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Councilman Nielsen?
Mayor Chadwick. I tend to agree with Councilman Keys on that point for the proportional share agreement. And so I would support that as a condition of approval, as well as the comments I mentioned about tree selection, that we avoid anything on the not recommended page of the Treasure Valley Tree Selection Guide. And I just closed it instead of looking at it. I will be specific and reference a page so that there's no confusion there.
This is the page of what not to plant?
This is page 47 of 52 in the Treasure Valley Tree Selection Guide, part of the Star City Code. The guide is not, but we reference it as the body of work that authorizes which tree species can be planted. And the section is titled "Not to be planted in rights of ways." And so any tree that's listed in there should not be planted in our subdivisions. And we may need to modify our code to get a little more specific and talk about some of those things, because I think we just reference the guide instead of being specific on that.
Okay.
No further questions. I think Sean had a comment.
Mr. Mayor, I just want, just for clarification, I want to make sure we're doing this right. What was the date of our adoption of that proportionate share agreement with ATD?
It was in April, I believe, right?
Yeah, so keep in mind, and I did have a conversation with ITD on this specific application, because his application actually was accepted prior to that agreement, and I believe ITD's review was prior to that agreement going into effect. And I believe what they, if I recall, because it's been a couple months since I've talked to them, but that they had already reviewed and assessed the proportionate share to the development. And they thought that going back after the fact and placing that requirement was not appropriate. Now, I just want to put that on the record. I don't, there's nothing in the file that states that. So if you do draft a condition, let's make sure it's clear that, you know, ITD is gonna review that. And I want to make sure that the applicant has the ability to discuss that with ITD before we put a condition on there that they weren't, I guess, expecting.
So you're saying ITD already assessed something for this development? I
Yeah,
didn't
and
realize
and maybe
ITD
Mark-
could assess.
Yeah, maybe Mark can address that a little more on exactly what that assessment was, those improvements to state. And
Yeah, I really appreciate you letting me come back up and discuss this because it is kind of a big deal. As far as the process goes, I didn't elaborate that much on it, but we did go through this process on the original application for the entire project, doing a traffic study that was larger than the project at that time. And that's where we got to an agreement to do the turn lane on State Street. There was no such agreement in effect when this project came through originally. If the project was to come through now, we wouldn't have the State Street improvement. We'd have, the agreement to do, if you do try to condition that on us, it's basically a double condition where we're now required to do the infrastructure improvement on State Street plus enter into an agreement. And Sean rightly brings up that our application was accepted prior to you guys enacting that ordinance, which makes us not subject to that ordinance currently. I understand where you're at. It is a very fresh ordinance. Star, just like every other city, does have traffic woes, and you guys are looking for ways to solve those problems. But I will say we've tried to do it the right way with ITD by doing the offsite improvements. I think it would be very unfair to basically hit us twice with offsite improvements and to require some sort of additional fees to be paid. So I do understand you're going to want to hold everybody accountable to it. I think it's very defensible with this application to say they're already doing offsite mitigation on the state highway system, plus their application was accepted prior to enacting that ordinance. So for future applications, certainly they could be subject to that ordinance.
So when was the Moon Valley Estates subdivision accepted?
February 17th.
We were originally scheduled for a hearing in March.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, this is very similar to the Rosti Farm. If you recall, they had the same information, only they actually had an amount on their letter. And so when they're reviewing it now, they're not going to go back and do it twice. They're gonna hold Rosti Farm to that.
So this basically what we're saying is that improvement that they're making on Highway 44 is the treatment that ITD is requesting to do.
That's what they explained to me when I asked that.
So Mayor Chadwick.
Councilman Nielsen.
So I agree with the applicant that it would be unfair to double dip, so to speak, on that. Although I do believe it is within the council's right under a development agreement that regardless of when the ordinance was put in place, that we can request that be part of the development agreement as a condition of approval of this application. So part of that agreement with ITD, my understanding also is that in lieu of fees, there may be things like putting in that right turn lane or improvements that ITD may choose to do instead of putting that fee in there. So am I recalling that correctly?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so I guess in light of that, I would still like it to be part of our development agreement and ask that it be reviewed with ITD under that proportional share agreement. And if there's any difference that be applied here as well.
Okay, and we can address that at final plat and get that letter. I believe that ITD will review it again and Mark can work with them.
Right. Yep.
Anyways, I wanted to get that on the record. I didn't want a condition specifically stating they had to do something without, because if we put a condition on the development agreement, ITD might not want that same condition. So I just want to make sure.
I think that way it puts it in the court for ITD.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Keys.
So I think, my concern is that I'm looking at the ITD letter dated March 11th, which was after this application was submitted in February. And I'm quoting from item number 9. It says, once the traffic impact study has been accepted and mitigation identified by the traffic impact study if any, is installed, ITD will withdraw any objection to the construction of the subdivision as presented in the application. And I guess what I'm looking for, apparently a TIS has been done. What does it take to get that accepted by ITD and get them to modify their position of objecting to this project?
So real quick, have you talked to ITD about that? About their objection?
Well,
And-
yeah, and that's that standard statement they've been putting on all their applications when the TIS is not completely reviewed.
So is the TIS was reviewed initially
And you're correct.
for the project,
Right, yeah,
which they provided a letter for that at the time that we did this, correct?
right, and I think
And
that's
that
when they,
provided the improvements that needed to be done on Highway 44, right? So, okay.
So, their letter, it's a boilerplate conditional letter that they send out to projects that don't have TISs associated with them. I wish they wouldn't have just used a boilerplate template type of letter to submit on something like this, because it is specific. And when you read the ACHD letter regarding Moon Valley Commons subdivision, they gave a little bit more analysis and gave a reason why they weren't requiring another TIS. They basically referenced the old TIS and acknowledged the number of units and what was studied, and no new conditions were going to be required. ITD, for whatever reason, didn't do that, and their letter is a little bit confusing, but it is really just a boilerplate letter to basically say, we don't have a TIS for this particular subdivision, so we can't really say what we would require. They don't reference the fact that, yeah, we already did review the project overall, not just this little portion of it. So our original traffic impact study did do those improvements. And, I'm okay with a condition to say, we should go meet with ITD and talk about it. And, but I think that's probably about the extent of it.
Got it? Yeah.
and I would suggest that maybe we draft a condition that says prior to final plat approval, that the ITD updates their letter or approves the TIS or whatever you wanted to say, but I think that would get you the comfort level you're looking for. Because then that'll give them the ability to finalize. I don't know where they're at with the review. I mean,
Okay.
we all kind of were on hold here for a while, so.
We were, yeah, it's been a while.
So, Mr.
did
Mayor,
Councilman Keys?
so should we consider tabling this application until after that meeting with ITD has occurred and we've gotten some clarity from them on where they're at on this project?
I mean, it's entirely up to you on the tabling side of this, but if we condition it at the final plat,
I think as long as the applicant's agreeable to the condition that we.
Yeah, I mean, it
Prior to
depends
final
on
plat.
the final wording of the condition. I don't want a condition written that says, go get ITD's quote unquote approval, because then they can hang us up for anything and we're not sure what we're agreeing. We'd be agreeing to agree and not knowing exactly what they're doing. But I would say, we're comfortable with meeting with ITD to get clarification to the city on or more information about the condition that we're constructing for ITD.
so let me ask this.
So I-
how many- I was gonna say, how many lots were we looking at before compared to what is total now? So if ITT looked at this, a study on a higher number of lots, what does that compare to what we have now?
Give me just a second, I have that written in my report here somewhere. Or Mark might even know.
It was 56 more lots in total in the plat right now in the Moon Valley Commons, but our traffic impact study was for more lots than was in the preliminary plat. So it was somewhere between 20 more lots than in the original traffic impact study.
So we have 56 more lots in the Moon Valley Commons, and how many lots in the Moon Valley Estates?
14.
14.
Mayor Chadwick,
Councilman Nielsen.
I want to make sure that we've got everything happening properly here. We've had an awful lot of interaction with the applicant after the public hearing has been closed. So
Chris?
I'd like to get council's recommendation on what we should do right here.
He's been having issues. We need to reopen the
I'm
public.
having-
We need to reopen the public hearing.
Yeah, anytime anything new has come up since since the public has had an opportunity to comment, they should have an opportunity to comment on those new items. It's not appropriate for the public to raise new issues or, ask new questions. But they certainly have a right to comment on any of the new information that's being brought before now that wasn't originally brought during the public hearing.
On the traffic, basically an ITD, right?
Question to that, Mr. Mayor, how would the online people watching be able to ask a question to anything new?
Well, they can email Dana right now. And we can give it a few minutes to let them respond to see if they want to speak. We got 3 people watching right now online.
Yeah, I don't know if they can do a hand wave or a chat. That might be an option too.
I don't think we could do that with this system, the way it's set up. But we can always give it about 3 or 4 minutes to have them email Dana. It's dpartridge@staridaho.org. Correct? If they would like to speak towards the traffic portions of this hearing. Does that suffice, Chris? In this new world?
Well, we do the best we can in this new world. I think as long as they have an opportunity to comment, and they have an opportunity to, you've given that, you might repeat the email address again in case somebody missed it, but as long as they have an opportunity to, participate, that's what the code requires. That's what the law requires. Because, they've already had notice. That's obviously one piece. Then the second piece is an opportunity to be heard. And that's the part we're trying to figure out here. And so as long as they can either email a question specifically to Dana, or if they can let her know they'd like to speak, and then they can be given access to actually address the council orally, either of those would work.
All right, I'm gonna try something here real quick, Chris. I want to see if this phone line over here is working.
Mr. Mayor, might I ask a question that's
Sure.
pertaining to something already covered? I just want to get some clarification on this, just to make sure. I want to make sure that the neighbors are well addressed in this, if we pass with conditions. Mr. Tate, in the letter from Mr. Aiken's attorney, is there
So-
anything that,
I'm gonna just say we're gonna reopen the public hearing real quick, just so everybody's on board with that. For the specifics of the ITD stuff.
yeah, well, this is already covered, it's just clarification.
Okay.
We have fans.
So we did find a chat feature on our online thing, Chris. And so a message was sent out to all 3 of them if they would like to speak. They will let us know.
Okay, and they can submit their comments through the chat application if that works. Or if you have an email that you wanted to put in there, so they could email Dana or, whatever option. So sounds like there's a few options here we can use to make sure people have a chance to comment. Or if they want to comment and say they don't have any comments, that might be helpful too, so we can have a record of that.
Okay. All right. So go ahead,
I
David.
was just going to
Sorry.
ask, is there anything in that letter that you objected to? It didn't sound like there was.
In the ITD letter?
No, in the letter from Jerry Kaiser? Mr. Akins.
I would have to re-review the letter It's been a while, a couple days since I've read it, but off the things that we talked about today, as far as not getting onto his property, not encumbering his property with an easement, I don't object to that.
That's basically the letter, so yes. Okay.
So with the hearing,
He would certainly be free to fence his property to make
are
sure.
you done talking about the ITD thing?
I just wanted to go back to the condition number 3 that is not new information. It was already brought up, but in the ITD letter, again, it's a boilerplate letter. At the bottom of item number 3, it says, if traffic generation numbers were not provided with the application, any necessary mitigation for traffic impacts identified, the traffic impact study shall be the responsibility of the applicant to install. Basically what I'm saying is we have already done that with our traffic impact study, and ITD is not reflecting in that in this letter. And I understand that is confusing as to why they wouldn't have done that. ACHD did do that in their letter. They remembered that they already had a shot at this thing and already conditioned everything. It's my opinion that ITD didn't realize that they had already done this and they put that boilerplate condition. I believe we meet the intent of their letter currently with our improvement on State Street. So I guess I would ask that we not do any additional ITD condition on our application. I think it just gets confusing to try to go back for some approval that we're not sure what they're going to say. I think that, this is clear enough that we've already got the ITD conditioned on our project. They already had the bite at the apple. And as far as additional number of units, we're talking maybe 20 to 30 more units than was in.
Well,
that.
let's talk about that just real quick, because if the one has 56 more units, the other has 14, that's 70. And you said your ITD original impact study equated for 20 more, so that's 50 more lots. So would it be fair to say that we talked to ITD about those 50 lots, about the traffic mitigation fees?
We could do that. I would want to go back and look at the exact traffic count on our original TIS. I think it's less than that. But I don't have our original TIS in front of me.
Mr. Mayor, we could, our next meeting is in 2 weeks. We could table the second application for 2 weeks just for the purpose of reopening it and getting that additional information. That way the applicant's not either agreeing to a condition he's not going to accept, or staff or council places one on, and that way I can get back with ITD.
Well, wouldn't it be for both? Wouldn't it be for both of them? I mean, in reality.
I guess it could be for both.
Right, because in reality, if we're adding, if our concerns about the ITD agreement and the mitigation fees there, from what I'm hearing is that the original traffic impact study, and just off the numbers you just shot off the cuff, was 20 more, right? So that covers 20 of those additional places. Well, we got 70 total, so there's 50 more houses, which is a combination of both. That's the way I'm looking at it. And maybe we get some information from ITD on this. I don't know if we can in 2 weeks.
I guess he does have the exact same letter for both applications.
Which goes back to the point of one's a 14 lot subdivision. It's a boilerplate letter.
But anyway, that's where I'm at with that. And
do you guys know, is there like a fee amount that they're looking to charge, or what? I'm just not familiar with the policy.
yeah, they base it, there's an analysis that they have that they determined to utilize that. But I mean, if it's 50 lot, I mean, if your mitigation is already for what you already approved, then in my opinion, it's the addition that should be looked at as far as that fee cost structure goes with.
Yeah.
Right?
I'd agree with that, Mr. Mayor.
In more recent applications, they actually have been putting a dollar amount on it, but back when you guys did it a year ago, I think your report required you to do the improvements on State Street. Yeah, without a cost.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it was limited to any additional units above what was in our traffic
And
study,
I think
then
that's
would be
fair.
fine with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because that's been my point, is their bite at the apple was based on that traffic study, and as long as it's only subject to the additional units on top of that on top of that original traffic study, then that's fine.
And again, my conversation with Sarah, they recognize that, and I don't think their intent was to double dip or make sure, or give you another assessment. I think it was just to recognize that they'd already requested that with the first phases. But again, we could get that clarified if you wish.
Okay. So do we, Chris?
Yes.
So do we continue on with the public hearing? Let people in the audience, if they want to speak now, and then close it, and then table it, and then reopen it next week or in 2 weeks?
If you're getting new information, you'll probably want to keep the public hearing open. If you have people that still, if you need to talk about items that have already been addressed, you could continue to address those. We've reopened it to talk about some things. If the people in the room want to talk about those issues, they could. But where you may still be getting information in, I would leave the public hearing open. You can still continue for 2 weeks, and then when it comes back, whatever that new information is would be presented, and then everybody would have a chance to council, everybody would have a chance to comment on what that new information is.
And then maybe give the applicant a chance to read the letter from Jerry Kaiser and. Sure.
So we will,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Keys,
I'd like to make a motion that we table the public hearing for Moon Valley Estates subdivision and for Moon Valley Common subdivision for 2 weeks.
until a date specific, June 16th?
Until June 16th.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, so that hearing's been tabled. The public hearing will still be open. So in 2 weeks, we come back and discuss that.
So maybe address anyone who's watching from home, that they can comment
Yeah, the
to me
three watching from home.
prior to that meeting, and we'll get those comments to the council.
Correct. Okay. All right. We have, moving on to number 7, reports. Chief?
No matter what he says about me, it's not true.
Mayor, Council, Jake Vogt, Chief of Police here in Star. As you all know, and the citizens know, one of the biggest complaints we have here in town is speeding vehicles, whether it's on State Street or subdivisions. I just wanted to let the council and mayor know in 2 weeks, I'll be addressing a proposal for a radar trailer. But with that, I just wanted the council to know, hopefully, I don't think I'll be able to get it done by the end of this week, but early next week, Eagle has 2 of the same trailers, and I've talked to them, and they're going to allow us to deploy it here in Star, so the council, mayor, and the citizens can look at it and stuff. We'll probably put it out here on State Street for a day or two. If you have driven through Eagle and seen it, it's the one that lights up with the red and blue lights, and it lets you know that it saw you.
So that's the one that just shows you your speed?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you know, some people treat that like a high score thing, so I mean.
And sometimes we sit down the street and we reward them for their high score. So,
Who got the biggest ticket?
and so just, kind of the whole process, Eagle just purchased 2 of these last fiscal year. With the county, we have 2 older style, and frankly, of the 2 with, the county, it goes from unincorporated to Star to CUNA back and forth. And of those 2, really we only have 1 because the one is not mechanically sound. And we have had that one, the good one here in Star the last week or so. You've probably seen it on Plummer and various places. With this new radar trailer that I'm going to propose, not only does it do the visual, single direction, but it also data logs in both directions. And it's got some pretty good software where we can provide back to HOAs and citizens what those reports are. And so even though it only visually shows you and kind of scares you one direction, it's getting speeds and times and counts in both directions. And so we'll be able to provide those to the city or the HOAs and individual people to let them know. So I think it's a pretty economic way to help deal with one of our biggest issues. And again, I'll address more, come 2 weeks from now. But I just wanted the council mayor to know to be looking for that, hopefully the end of this week, but more than likely early next week. And I'll let you all know when to start looking.
Okay,
That is all,
Thanks,
sir.
Chief.
thank you, sir. Sean? Nothing? Hershey?
I'll be 30 seconds. The summer lunch program for the food bank, the outreach has started today. And it's going to be running through the entirety of summer on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and I believe Thursdays. I think they're doing it 3 days a week. My museum committee, now that the COVID thing's winding down, will look at getting that actually started. Also, fire will be going back to normal meetings as well, so be happy to get back with those folks. End report.
Councilman Keys?
Mr. Mayor, this last Saturday, I participated with the Boise River Enhancement Network in a river cleanup here in Star. We had about 20 people showed up and picked up bags and bags of trash along the river. I also have a question for you when you get to your report about the timing, the light of Plummer. I thought that was supposed to begin construction already, and I may have missed it today, but I don't think it has.
They're
And-
working on it, right? They've already started on it yesterday.
Oh, did they? Okay, I just got back into town. I've been out of town for a couple days.
You come east.
But that's good news. And then the other thing I have is I'd like to request that in our packets going forward, that we put the land use staff report at the beginning of each applicant's, I guess.
That's been
Section.
corrected. We talked about that here before the hearing. So
Okay,
that's
that-
gonna be fixed.
Yeah, it just makes it easier, I think, on us. That's all I've got. Thank you.
The perpetrators were punished
Yes.
severely.
Oh, I don't want punishment. I just want it fixed.
Councilwoman?
All I have to report is the Pathways and Beautification Committee is meeting tomorrow or on the 4th, I guess that's on Thursday, at 6 PM at the Star Fire Station. I believe it's a new one. And that's it.
Okay. Councilman Nielsen?
Similarly, the Boise Area Metro Chamber of Commerce is going to resume meetings, so I'll resume
Start back on
attendance.
that. Okay, cool. For me, just to let you guys know that we do have credit card payment processing systems in place up front for anybody that does business with the city now. And it's been working quite well, actually. We are, we are, lost my train of thought here. I apologize. I should have a meeting here in the next couple weeks with our city engineer regarding the 960 Main. They've got an architect in place. They've got drawings all done. They've met out there already. So we should start seeing some stuff being brought here about getting that out for everybody. I was going to tell you that the light at Plummer is going. Our traffic impact study is in full swing right now for between Highway 16 and Seneca Springs. We should see in July the first draft report of that, I believe, correct? Yep. And then the final report in August, which will be good. Sean and I have met with ITD regarding their expansion here down in Star. It's going to happen in 2024. So they're really getting the city's feedback on this expansion, which I think is great. As far as our pathways and sidewalks and what's going to happen in certain parts because of the confinements of where the businesses and stuff are, which is really good that they're interacting with us. Anything else? You guys have questions for me on? No? All right, very good. I appreciate you all. Thank you very much. And we are adjourned.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.